I was a little kid, 12 or 13 years old, when I was first allowed to start hanging out with the older kids in my family. They kinda had to if they wanted to spend time away from the adults. If I was along, they couldn't get too crazy. Just quiet nights hanging out and listening to music. To me, that was just about the coolest thing that could have happened. We were going to spend the night at a friend's house. He lived out in the boonies away from the city, so we had to take a bit of a drive from one of the older teens. They made me sit in the back seat as we drove to pick up some CDs and a case of beer from the cousin's house. It was the end of September, so even at 7 at night, the sky was starting to darken, the sun already below the tree line as we drove out into the wooded back roads. I was just happy enough to finally be led along, even if my brother in the front seat wasn't exactly thrilled. I could tell they were trying to make the best of it, though, even joking along with me. It seemed like we were driving for nearly half an hour, and the darkness began to settle in with the dying of the sun. The woods on either side of the road stood tall and dark, the wisps of dark blue sky disappearing quickly as soon as all that could be seen would be from the dim light of the moon and the sideways glow of our headlights. As I was told, I sat in the back of the car, not making a peep, doing my best not to say something stupid or uncool. I never liked these woods, even when we lived near them. They always seemed so much darker than any other forest I'd ever been in. But I was with the cool kids, older kids, so I kept my mouth shut. We got about halfway to the house when I noticed that we had slowed down. My cousin and brother went silent, and I could finally hear they were giving whispers to each other. I wasn't quick enough to sit up and see, but our car jinked out of the way of something as my cousin made giddy, excited noises, flooring it down the dark forest road. I turned around in my seat to look out the back window. In the darkness, the red glow of the rear view brake lights, I could see a shape for a split second, illuminated, just for that moment. She, at least I thought it, at the time it was a she, stood much taller than our little sports sedan, and I saw that as we passed her, she had turned and started following us before we'd started to speed off. I didn't have to say anything. We were already zooming down the winding road at a breakneck speed. We still had a bit of a drive longer before we got to our cousin's house, so we turned up the music and tried to laugh about nearly hitting a homeless woman. I could tell they were still kind of freaked out, but after a little bit we were back to joking around. Our cousin lived in a rural plot of land that was meant to be a golf course sometime in the future, but had houses placed on it already, with massive lawns stretching like fairways to the road. We pulled into the driveway and cruised up to the house. It had a windowed porch, and my cousin left the headlights on so that he could see in the dark as he ran to find the beer and music inside. I could see him moving from room to room in the scattered beams we were casting. What was taking so long? We'd already listened to 3 songs and he still hadn't come out. The hairs on the back of my neck started to stand up. I had the urge to look behind us. Something told me I should. That long stretch of trimmed and groomed grass was lit by bright spotlights, illuminating the entire golf course. It was a good 70, maybe 80 yards to the darkness of the tree line of the woods. There was a shape coming from that blackness, just as black as the woods itself. It passed underneath one of the wild fields of light. At a distance I could see that its hair was ragged, wild like a briar bush. Her walk, I could say it was a her now, was disjointed, as if it was using these long, crooked legs for the first time in ages, stumbling in an urgent manner directly at us. Her arms were just as crooked, oddly angled at her sides to try and balance, almost as if they were reaching out for me as she made a beeline right for our car. My brother yelled for my cousin to hurry up. He had turned around. My hand was on his sleeve before I even knew I did it. He honked the horn again and again, and still she kept walking at us. By now she was only 40 or 50 yards away, and I could see she wore a ratty dress, or even a shawl over her body. It swayed from side to side as she lost and caught her balance. Our cousin came flying out the door, not seeing what we were getting worried about. He threw a box of CDs in the back seat and a case of beer in right after before hopping back into the driver's seat. He backed out of the driveway quickly as we kept telling him to floor it. He didn't understand why until the headlights caught her. She had the face of a gaunt old woman, eyes dark as pits. She looked at all of us at the same time, but it felt like she was staring only at me. We left her in a cloud of our dust as we kicked up gravel on the way to the main road again. We made record time on the drive over, making the usually half-hour drive in under 15 minutes. We never really talked about what we saw that night, just tried to put it out of the back of our minds. Keep it quiet. It would only come out in talking with our family about traditional stories years later, and it was only then that I could connect with what happened that night with a legend that's told among our people. That was the first night that I'd ever met the dear lady.